problems with technology today, dear viewer. Phone battery running out, camera running out, because we're speaking to all these people, which you'll see later. Come back. Sean Long's been released from Featherstone Rovers. I should have started with Dewsbury. Just say congratulations, Dewsbury. There's our League One roundup this week, because there's no time to talk about anything. Because you're all waiting for us to come on air. I think we should start with Featherstone, because it's the new news. It is breaking news this evening. Sean Long's left Featherstone by mutual consent, which, if you look it up in the dictionary, apparently means sex. But James Ford in as interim coach. That was a good move from him from Wakefield. They've lost, right, so they're 8 points. Well, I've got the table in front of me, I can read it myself. They've won 19 of 21 games, so they've lost 2. That's maths for you. Points difference of plus 619. 8 points clear of Toulouse in second place. How many games left? Not many.
They only need 2 more wins.
Six.
2 more wins
confirm,
to clinch.
I think.
Right.
League leaders
shield.
Eight.
They've lost to Toulouse and Halifax, obviously yesterday.
Both at home. Oh no,
Toulouse
away at home.
yeah.
Toulouse is at home.
So, I mean, obviously, he says the statement's nonsense, isn't it? Well, let me go to the statement, because it is not. I'm going to have to find this now, but you can't. I just don't understand how, when you're the top of the table, you've lost 2 games all season, you part company with your coach, #BlueWolves. You've got to get the hashtag in there if you're a social media person these days. Here's what it says. Well, it tells me, I don't want to join your squad builder. Club statement, Sean Long. God, that website. We can confirm that we today reached an agreement with head coach Sean Long to part company with immediate effect. The club has invested significantly this year
in Sean Long
to ensure in Sean Long we trust, to ensure that we give ourselves the best possible chance of promotion to Super League in 2023. They are 8 points clear at the top of the table. The change in rules that come into effect in 2024 make it extremely difficult to reach this goal in the future. They've got a decent ground, haven't they? Mm-hmm. Decent facilities.
Yeah.
Solvent.
Not sure whether they've got those flashing advertising boards.
Those advertising boards. Share them with Keith, you can know in different ways. The rules that come into effect make it extremely difficult to... Anyway, blah, 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 blah. The board have backed this ambition by investing in a playing squad of Super League quality and have been disappointed, therefore, in this season's team performance against some of our promotion rivals. They've lost 2 games and are 8 points clear.
One of whom was Halifax, which, to be fair, have just crept into the 6 with that victory. Not a promotion rival, I would have said.
As we reach the countdown to the playoff series, we need to ensure that we maximise the huge potential and high quality of our playing roster, and we feel this change will enable us to make the required step up, which is required. We would like to place on record our thanks to Sean, blah, 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 blah. We would ask our fans to continue to support the club in their usual way, just as they did in such large numbers at Halifax, blah, 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 blah. You can't make a statement like that when you've lost 2 games. We're going to sack our coach. We're 8 points clear at the top of the table. What's going on? We don't know.
I just think it's bizarre. There must be something else going on behind the scenes, either a fallout between Sean Long and the owner or the directors. But to lose 2 games, be 8 points clear, it's very difficult to go through an entire season and perform at your best week in, week out, and to go through unbeaten. And ultimately, they've got 2 more games to win, of which they've probably got about 8 to go at, and then they've got 2 playoffs to win. So I don't know. I mean, unless they've got an eye on somebody that they want to bring in to replace him, but it must be cost. Well, exactly. Daryl Powell, does he cross from Castleford to Featherstone via Warrington? Maybe, but I don't know.
I still don't think it can possibly be a decision based on anything to do with the playing, because nobody gets sacked for being almost perfect. So it's clearly...
Well, I mean, on this basis, then Dewsbury should sack Liam Finn, because he's only 5 points clear. And they drew with Oldham.
He did draw again.
Yeah, so it's terrible.
So it's clearly something isn't working in the dynamic behind the scenes, which could be a relatively highly strung owner who has previous. It could be that Sean is a bit of a maverick who wants to do it his way and not the way of the person that's paying the money. It could possibly be that it's partly a cost-saving exercise because whilst they may well have paid him off, which is I think what mutual consent these days means, the coach has accepted an amount of money to leave. Yeah. Therefore, we have his agreement to leave, but we've made the decision that we're going to find an amount of money to offer him. And it may well be that James Ford coming in, that there's too many cooks, and they've decided that it's spoiling the broth on the basis of one defeat.
But I don't know how many years he signed in terms of a contract. But if you're Sean Long, there's no way you're going to accept anything other than paying up to the end of your contract.
Yeah.
Because there are no grounds, as one would imagine, based on that statement there, for him to be dismissed. On performance grounds. So it has to be a fallout.
I mean, as you say, there's so much going around with coaching change before we even get to what's happened on the field. But Sean Long has been linked with Warrington as an assistant to Sam Burgess. Now, if Featherstone have heard that there's a chance that Sean Long could be going to Warrington effective almost immediately, have they got their retaliation in first? Who knows?
Andy knows. My mate's a Qantas airline pilot. He's just helped Sam Burgess carry his new Warrington Wolves backpack up the stairs of the London flight out of Sydney while he was on the phone to his old mate Longy. Andy there with the exclusive. I mean, that'll be picked up on some website soon. Yeah. News.
Probably some sort of breach of
Qantas security.
Qantas, yeah.
Do pilots carry the bags on for that? Andy, I'm not doubting the provenance of this story, but
the pilot helped Sam Burgess with his bags. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Maybe
Sam Burgess to Warrington, which the Jungle Drums, which obviously is Andy Last rather than Sam Burgess, but the Jungle Drums are getting stronger on this one, and so you go from Steve Price, experienced coach,
with a track record,
Darryl Powell, experienced coach,
with a track record,
Sam Burgess. I mean, they've talked about in their statements, in interviews with the chairman on Radio Merseyside, whichever BBC it is, about the culture at the club. Sam Burgess, very good player, very highly publicised private life. The two things don't necessarily.
How can you go from pursuing Justin Holbrook, who has agreed to come and then reneges because he gets an offer to stay in Sydney, which apparently is better for his family, understood, but Justin Holbrook, coaching pedigree in Super League, proven. Just what we need, a guy to come in, take a mixed bag of talent and turn it into the potential that we hoped it would be when we signed it. Exactly what he did with St Helens. He'll need a couple of years maybe, but he's the guy we want to build the team around. Or we could go down the route of signing Greg Inglis and various other players who had a profile. Who was the England Rugby Union player?
Oh, Luther Burrell.
Luther Burrell, who again, not saying that he didn't deserve a chance in Super League, but that was a signing as if to say, look at us, we're making a signing, rather than how does that signing fit in with what we're trying to build and do. And it's almost like the same with Sam Burgess. Oh, that'll get people buying season tickets. That'll get us loads of coverage in the media. But he hasn't got a track record in coaching. Now, there was talk that maybe Jason Clark, who was his teammate and great friend at the Rabbitohs, might come back to Warrington and actually physically do the coaching. As indeed perhaps Sean Long might have been linked with that role as well. But I think it goes back to the debate we were having last week about what do Warrington want to be? Who do they see that they are? And I would say that whether Sam Burgess comes or not, the interview that Stuart Middleton did was one of the most bizarre things I have heard for a very long time. Basically, he was asked the question, was hiring Darryl Powell a mistake? And he said with hindsight it was, but then didn't go on to say, but we were the people that hired Darryl Powell, so we're stepping down because we got it wrong. What a strange and almost unfathomable thing to say about an appointment that you've made.
We've got Warrington fans in the chat, so do you think it was a mistake to employ Darryl Powell 2 years ago when it was announced?
No, of course it wasn't. But to go back now and say that it was is not only disrespectful to Darryl Powell, but actually says we don't have a clue what we're doing.
I think it shows naivety, incredible naivety, because he would say, Stuart Middleton would say, he was just being honest, and that was his honest view at that time. So you can't then berate him for being honest. But I would question, well, what's the strategy here? Where's the club heading? Where's your long-term 5-10 year vision of where this club is going? And as you've already said, how do you go from Tony Smith, Steve Price, Justin Holbrook offer the job to then offer a job to somebody who's barely coached? I mean, I may be doing him a disservice. I'm not aware of what his coaching history is. Same with Jason Clarke. I've not heard that, but Jason is a really decent bloke, but I'm not aware of his coaching, track record. It certainly won't be long.
What they need is that they've got talent. There is no doubt about that. But what they don't seem to have is the ability to gel as a team, and that takes coaching of the highest order, because it's not about we did really well on the training field this week. Well, no, you did, because we signed you because we knew you were good. We know you can pass to your left and your right, and if necessary, but you can't. You've got to take very disparate parts and make them a whole, and that's a whole different level of coaching, rather than walking in the dressing room and going, I'm Sam Burgess, you may have heard of me, now go and do what I say. Yeah. They don't need that. I have to say that, and I know we will talk about the games this week, I was really disappointed with Warrington's start this week.
What a dreadful performance it was. Because I said last week on the programme that if they come out and play well, it shows that they weren't playing for the coach, and they were disgraced for doing that. But they didn't do that. They were dreadful again.
They made so many mistakes in that first quarter, and again, without
against the good side, obviously.
Catalan were terrific, but you give them a mistake, they'll score, and suddenly you're 18 points down. You're not going to win that game. There didn't seem to be the hunger and the passion. Now everybody's talking about bounce back and rebound, and I didn't see one.
You would have expected to see one, though, wouldn't you? Because they've
been put under scrutiny, and
because of that performance at Wakefield, which was so abject that it almost pointed to the suggestion that have they played this badly to get the coach sacked, and therefore the shackles are off and you can play with freedom the week after. But I mean, what's his name? Gary Chambers, in his post-match interview on Sky, he was just saying what he would have anticipated saying before the game. It didn't. His comments to me didn't reflect what was seen on the field. I didn't see a great deal of effort and desire.
I've seen the willingness in the dressing room. Yeah, I think the fans wanted to see that willingness on the field.
I think he was when he was talking there, he was talking to the players in that he was saying, "I've got your back," which was not what Darryl Powell was saying the week before or had been saying. I think that's what that spoke about to me was, look, we're in this together as a collective. I'll support you and I'll defend you. And I'm sure he was probably saying different things behind closed doors, but you would have expected to see a bigger upturn in performance than what they showed against Catalan. Appreciating that Catalan are obviously top of the table, but I don't know. I mean, when he talked about they were all non-exec directors, Stuart Middleton, and the only sort of director they had was the CEO, Carl Fitzpatrick, and I don't know. I just questioned the direction of the club when I was listening to what he was saying. From the outside looking in, I always felt it was a fairly well-run club. But listening to the interview,
I think they've got some great initiatives, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're focused on performance of the first team. Yeah. Like we were also talking, and I know we will more, about Women's Rugby League at the moment and the clubs that are successful and those who are at a different level at the moment. And the backing that they get from senior management. And we were fortunate enough to be in Brighouse this afternoon at the previews for the Challenge Cup. But both Leeds and St Helens women said independently how much the club had done for them, how important it was for them to be allowed to play on the home ground, and how that elevated it a level. All the backing that they get in terms of S&C and physiotherapy, and how they're made to feel part of that one club. Wigan are doing that, and they're showing an upturn again in their women's team. Warrington aren't doing that. And I think, again, it's like, what is your focus on? Are you trying to build a club that includes everybody? I don't think their wheelchair team, again, who are struggling a little bit at the moment, feel the same arm around the shoulder that perhaps other clubs are giving their wheelchair teams. And I'm not saying that this is why they're not winning in Super League, but it goes back to the question that we both raised. We did last week, and you just had. Who are they? Who do they want to be?
I just think, what's the overall strategy? Yeah. Where is that club going? They've done some great initiatives. You said, PDRL and the tour down under. They sent academy players down under.
Yeah.
There's lots of good things going on. Lots of good things that you can see that Carl's doing in terms of trying to raise the profile of the club, which are all very good. But how do they fit under that strategy? Where are they heading? And for me, the interview with Stuart Middleton didn't answer any of that.
And raised more questions.
Absolutely, it raised far more questions than it did give answers. And I just thought, has anybody given Stuart there going into that interview any PR guidance about what are the kind of questions that you're likely to be asked, and how do we answer them as a club? Because, as you've rightly said, he almost pointed the finger at himself and his board by suggesting that it was the wrong appointment. It wasn't the wrong appointment.
No.
And
nobody said at the time, there's something questionable. That's a bit of a risk going for Darragh. Everybody went, you've gone and got the best man available, and well done from prizing him away from Castleford, and we're going to now play the kind of rugby. The other thing that he said, which was, again, I don't know if it was picked up on, and maybe reading too much into it. He said, paraphrasing him, that looking back, he didn't like the way that a lot of the people who left had been treated.
Yeah.
Which, again, you look back at, does he mean Chris Hill? Does he mean Mike Cooper? Does he mean Lee Breers? But if you're a senior management in an organisation, you have to sanction that, or you have to talk to whoever is making that decision about, why are we making it as a club? Where do we go in the meantime? How are we handling it as a club? What's the PR around it? Have we looked after these guys? Because they've been really good for us and really important. And how would you say that, like, we're throwing them out? And now, if he thought that was an issue, that was over a year ago. The management have to take responsibility for that.
Agreed. And I think Warrington fans know that. I think that's what's probably even opened their eyes a little bit more for after that interview. I don't know. I genuinely don't know where they're heading as a club. I think Powell has spoke before about culture, hasn't he, at the club, and the way in which players sort of behaved, what their attitudes was and stuff like that. And he was obviously trying to change that. I think the way in which he went about it was obviously not the right way.
But he mentioned the word sense of entitlement, which again tells you something about the culture in a place, that people expect something. You go, well, no, we've got to work for it, particularly if we're ever going to win the Super League.
But I think if you compare them to Lee, which is interesting, so you've got somebody at Lee who's got plenty of money behind him, is prepared to splash it about a bit. But actually, the way that they've built that team, they've sort of... Have they been helped by the fact they were probably considered to be underdogs? Maybe they have. Maybe next season's a greater challenge because of the success that they're going to have, or have had so far this year. That becomes a greater challenge for them next year. But just because you've got a lot of money, which Warrington do as a club, shouldn't give you a sense of entitlement.
No.
And people have mentioned about Paul Rowley and whether he's a name that might be in the frame. But again, I'm not convinced about that as a choice, and that's no disrespect to Paul Rowley, but I don't know how that fits in with where they want to go as a club. I would have thought that there was talk of is the assistant at Cronulla, someone like that, where Hull KR have gone and got Willie Peters. They've gone and got coaches from Australia. Clubs have gone and got coaches from Australia that have probably been relatively unknown names to people in the UK, unless you're a real connoisseur of Australian rugby league. And teams have had some success with those coaches. I'm not convinced that Sam Burgess fits in that frame.
It's your point, Lewis. She's won a grand final and a Challenge Cup. Loads of comments. I tell you what, just reading the comments through, it reminds me, because we had a couple of years where everything was all over the place, as everyone was. It's nice to be back live and have you involved, and it's nice to be back in the corner doing what I used to do in the olden days. The skill levels at Warrington, say Kevin, are amateur level players. They get worse the longer they are at the club. Chris S. James has spoken very well, and I hope they start playing for him. Their contracts and their pride, as well as the fans, Carsten, who's the font of all knowledge. Hello, Carsten.
In Switzerland, for sure.
Sam Burgess coached the Aurora Valley Axemen.
Yes, he did.
There you go. And he says, Warrington are the new Catalans. A retirement place for disgraced or unmotivated NRL players with a questionable character. Well, at least they didn't sign him at Warrington. Apart from Vaughan, Williams, Wrench, Thewlis, Nicholson and Ashton, the rest can go, says Kevin. Kevin said, when Smith was managing why we could put out teams of the level of players we had. It's all very.
But what I would contend to some of those comments is, were people saying that those same players should have gone when they won, what was it, 8 games on the trot?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think people were. The question remains: what went wrong after 8 games to winning 8 games to losing 8 games or whatever they've done since then?
But it's the manner that they're playing, I think, more than the winning or losing of the games. I think it's more to do with the fact that the desire that I thought would have been... This is no reflection on Gary Chambers, who clearly is Mr. Warrington and had very little time to deal with not only taking over at the club but playing the best team in the league at the moment. But I thought there would have been a desire, not necessarily just for him, because he's clearly somebody that is well loved at the club, but for themselves. And I didn't see it. Now,
but where's the link with Sam Burgess? He has no link to Warrington. There's no link with Sean Long.
No.
He's famous, and they like publicity stunts, don't they?
And
that sounds like a
I'm not saying that there has to be a link with the club.
And maybe Greg Inglis will come back with him as well, because they're great mates and they play together. But it's not what they need in looking from the outside looking in. And quite rightly, we'll get to debate what some other clubs who are underperforming at the moment might need at the moment. But I think it's a worthwhile discussion, because it's not really about Warrington. It is also about Castleford. It's about Leeds. It's about Featherstone. What, as a club, are you hoping to achieve? Not this season, but over a period of time. What are you building? What do you stand for? Who are you? And is it sustainable? Because there's absolutely no doubt that St Helens at the moment are going through an interesting period with a new coach, which was always going to happen, and with some players who are irreplaceable coming to the end of their careers. And it'd be really interesting to see if they can maintain that performance on the field with the necessary change that they're going to have in personnel. And it won't be easy. And any sport will tell you, very rarely happens, that when you've had a group of people who have achieved together over a long period of time, that's what you built. That didn't start overnight, but you built to a point where you're almost unbeatable, and then 3 or 4 or 5 of those players come to the end of their career, and you can't fill the gap straight away with like for like. Now, that hasn't happened with Warrington. Warrington, it's just constant change, and that's where they've got to sit down and say, well, who's in contract, who's out of contract, I thought Josh Thewlis again looked one of the players who was really trying to make an impression, because he's a young Warrington kid. It means something to play, but I'm not sure he's a winger. I think his best position maybe is fullback, but occupying a fullback berth is a very highly paid Australian who is as much of a liability. With the greatest, it's very easy for us who've never played the game, but the mistake that Matt Duffy made early on in the game that gifted the Dragons the first try was exactly what they didn't need. But again, you look back at Matt Duffy and where he came from and which clubs he played for and why they decided that he was surplus to requirements at certain points in his career. It was because he had the flaws in his game that existed on Thursday night. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I think if it was me, I'd be saying Thewlis should be a fullback, and he cares, and he's going to make mistakes like Davy Litton does sometimes at Hull. But you look at him and you think, if they're looking for a long-term replacement for somebody like Jamie Shaw, who's given tremendous service at Hull, but he's clearly coming to the end of a career where the fans have really taken to him because he's one of their own, then Davy Litton is almost the perfect alternative. But you have to give him time to become Jamie Shaw. That's what I don't get with Warrington, and I think Castleford to a lesser extent. It's always chopping and changing. It's never what do we want to be and how do we want to get there. Featherstone now is another example of a team that are nearly where they want to be, but they're chopping and changing. Well, who are you? What do you want to be?
And for seemingly no reason, because obviously that statement's nonsense. Kevin says, when we won the first 8 games, it was because we had the majority of the ball. As soon as we didn't have it, we looked very fragile and let easy tries in. So we knew that when it comes down to the big games, we'd crumble. That right-hand side, Kevin. I would recommend, if you want a more in-depth rant-stroke analysis of the Warrington situation, that you go and listen to the last What Would Brian Bevan Say, which is hilarious in the bit where someone tries to... they take calls on Zoom, which is brilliant, but someone tries to prank them with some pornography. So do listen to that, because it's very funny. Their opinions are those of fans, so they have strong opinions on things, but it's very good. And watch Tackle Bags, because I'm on it. All those Leeds in Crisis t-shirts at the wholesalers, can we change the print to say Warrington, says Andy? When we were at Proper Sport...
I don't think Leeds are out of it.
No, when we were at Proper Sport, we did have a range of t-shirts for every club, just on the off chance. I don't know how many we sold. I know we sold a couple of the...
Can you not get one where they sort of have Velcro?
I just take it...
Or just have all the teams
yeah.
on them and just put a little asterisk saying delete as appropriate.
We even put it in French for Catalans. I don't know how many we sold. I know we sold a couple of the Pyongyang t-shirts because someone wore it at Wembley, but...
just going back to the Warrington-Catalan game, we shouldn't brush over how well Catalan played, because they had some key players out, including McAlorum, who dropped out on the morning of the game. But they are now playing to such a highly defined structure that it doesn't really matter who plays. Yeah, I thought Da Costa was fantastic coming in. It could have been McAlorum, but the belief that they had, that when they got where they finished sets, how that aggressively they wanted to defend, that how their key pivotal players got their hands on the ball more than anybody else. So it's no surprise that Tom Johnson and Tom Davis are playing so well at the moment, because they've got guys inside them like Tyrone May and Mitchell Pearce and Sam Tompkins who just know how to manage a game. I thought they were sensational. Down on troops, wasn't flamboyant particularly, but you looked at some of their forwards, Roman Navarrete, just outstanding. Without, taking the eye, just like, it's Navarrete again, taking one of those drives. And
it was a workmanlike performance, wasn't it? A professional performance.
But everybody knew their job.
Yeah,
and total contrast to Warrington.
I think that's why they have to be favourites in the competition at the moment, because they are pretty solid. I don't think they played to their best of their ability that night. Obviously, as you say, they players out, but they still nevertheless put in a very good performance. And
I think the other thing is they're going to get at least one, possibly two home semi-finals. Last year, the game that really disappointed them more than any other was the playoff game, because they'd done everything to give them a chance to go to Old Trafford, and they'd never factored in losing at home. No. So I think if they get back to... You may remember that game.
I think they couldn't factor in the referee. That's why.
That's what I mean. But I think that really hurt them more than I think we imagine over here. That home record is intensely proud, and they thought, well, if we're in the playoffs and we've got a home game,
none of the clubs in that playoff want to go to Catalan, do they? No. Play at Catalan.
But I think that makes them even more difficult to beat this year.
Yeah, I'd agree. I just can't see them. I can't see them past not getting to the grand final based on form and, as you say, that advantage which is significant at home in the playoffs.
So, Carsten, Andy, someone did try and... so I was in contact with someone earlier this year to get the kits made. The kits have been designed. I need to get back in touch with them because they didn't reply to me. But if we can... The Pylons home kit is... It's the best thing you will ever see.
What colours?
Well, it's blue and white and red and white because of the flag.
Yeah.
And grey because if I made it white, then people think it'd be a Wakefield kit. But it's.
No team ever wins in grey.
Have I never shown you the design?
I don't think so.
It's a work of art. It's absolutely superb. But that's some nonsense rather than talking about rugby. Kevin says the Tackles Catalans were putting in no problem putting their bodies on the line. Maybe desire, effort, all these words that you can't necessarily quantify, but Warrington looked like they had none of it. Let's talk Castleford then. If Darrell Parr was the wrong appointment 2 years ago, then Andy Last was the wrong appointment when they appointed him. How many months ago? 6 months ago?
19 games.
And it's not a criticism of Andy Last, because I don't know what he coaches like. But
even Craig Lingard today, who has been elevated to his assistant, is saying if the league status was determined by how much work your coach put in, Castleford under Andy Last would have been somewhere near the top. Now, he would say that, wouldn't he? But I think other people have confirmed that he is incredibly passionate, incredibly knowledgeable,
well, the fact that Sean,
and incredibly diligent in the job that he did at Castleford. So it must be about the players he has to work with.
Sean Wayne has him as part of his English staff, doesn't he? So he can't be bad at what he does. Maybe he's not a head coach. Maybe that's just how it is. Some people are touch judges, some people are referees. But
after this week, some will be known.
The hilarious protest afterwards, by the way, which reminded me of the hilariously brilliant Wakefield Trinity fans invade Red Hall in the year 2000 to get our 4 points back. I think there were 6 of us there, and it looked like the same at Castleford on Friday. It's not the coach.
What is
I don't want to turn this programme into it used to be defending referees, now we're defending coaches.
What is completely unacceptable is that the manner in which he was sacked and the fact that he then had to run the gauntlet of some fans who were incredibly abusive. Not for us to say, but if you think that's supporting your club, please don't go anymore.
But that's on the club as well in terms of how they manage things. They could have.
Yeah.
Your fans are fans, and
but again,
they shouldn't do that.
We've seen Darryl Powell sacked at 9 o'clock on a Sunday night. I think that's a bit disrespectful. We've seen Andy Last suddenly murmurings that he'd gone because he wasn't at the press conference that he should have been at post game. Again, show these people some respect. They work tirelessly for your club, and don't pander to the fact there's a group of people outside saying sack the board, we'll get rid of the coach.
It's not far removed from Adam Pearson going in front of the Sky cameras, is it?
Although apparently,
which of course we all have to say at this point, no, I didn't sack him on the telly.
Well, apparently, in a book that is coming out,
book,
Lee Radford did know that he had been removed, and
I'm sure he did.
Was in the dressing room,
I'm sure
telling
he did.
the players,
but nevertheless,
the perception.
But it's the perception that Andy Last has been sacked on the back of what was a horrendous result. Now losing 28-0 at home to Huddersfield when you have to win at least maybe 1 or 2 games between now and the end of the season. That is clearly things. As a board of directors, you're panicking. If we get relegated, we may never come back. We have to be seen to be doing something. Why don't you look at the squad that you've got?
I mean, all coaches work hard, so
that's a given.
It is. It's such a difficult job. I mean, people think refereeing is difficult, but I think coaching's probably even harder. And the chances of you being sacked as a referee are far less than they are as a coach. It's just been demonstrated in the last week or so.
There's no more referees.
Yeah. So it is such a difficult job. There's no two ways about that. So I remember questioning at the time whether Andy Last was the right appointment, and that's nothing to do with Andy Last. It's just that what I remember saying was when they appointed Lee Radford brought Andy Last with them. Mm-hmm. Would they have appointed Andy Last at the time they chose to appoint Lee Radford? And they may have done, as they subsequently did.
Well, they did have a lot of ex-Hull players.
Yeah, they are the closest club to Hull, other than Hull KR, so geographically makes it easier. But I go back to what I was saying about Warrington. Where's the club? Where's the club's direction? Where are they heading? Where's the long-term strategy? I mean, Lingard said today something about he didn't know Andy Last when he got appointed. I find that slightly odd that you appoint somebody that you don't know. How can you decide from the outside looking in whether
who has made that decision?
Well, is he a good coach? Well, he must be, because they're doing pretty well. But there's so much that goes into coaching that unless you have inside information as to how that is operating, who's pulling the strings, who's making the decisions, then I'm not entirely sure how that works.
So we'll come to Blake Austin in a minute, because that's another strange decision, I think, even from Castleford's point of view. That hints of panic. That's like, can you get us enough wins to?
And again,
keep
who
us
made
in
that
the division?
decision?
Because Andy Last said I didn't know anything about it, and Rowan Smith said I didn't know anything about it. So it's clearly been initiated by the management of Blake Austin, but somebody's made the decision that that's what we want. So coming back to that in a minute, what I find difficult to understand with Castleford at the moment is the issues around the club are greater than the playing staff that they've currently got. So the ground is still an issue. We now have grading. You're looking at most clubs, even in the Championship, are trying to do things to say we've taken on board the fact that this grading is coming in, whether we like it or not. We appreciate that we need to put the spotlight on ourselves. There are certain things we need to do, things we need to initiate within the club. I don't see any of that at Castleford. And they're going to come back and say, oh, we've got planning permission in for a ground. But somebody posted a picture the other day of Richard Wright on a digger saying, we are getting our new... That was 2010. And yeah, they may have a planning permission in again at the moment, but I still don't see within the club where they are moving forward, how they are in a better space than they were. You know, the fall from 2017, when you include that COVID wiped out virtually a season, is remarkable.
I mean, I think this started last year, really, when Powell was there. The squads you have to change your squad every year, bit by bit. You can't make wholesale changes, otherwise you lose what you've built.
Oh, you can't let contracts all run out at the same time.
That's what I mean. You have to have contracts ending at different times or in different seasons to allow that change to sort of almost organically happen, because they've ended up having a squad. Bradford's inherited a squad that's an ageing squad, and then he probably added to that by bringing some older players from Hull. Maybe that didn't help, but I just don't think. I think it's more than that. I just don't know. They offered him a 2.5-year contract. I remember saying this at the time when they offered Andy Last a 2.5-year contract. I thought it would be 12 months or next season, 2024, plus the remainder of 2023.
Or take us to the end of 2023.
And then we'll review it again. Yeah. Why would you offer 2.5 years? That's bizarre.
In the way that Wakefield were ruthless in getting rid of Willie Poaching at the end of last year.
And particularly when he'd been in interim charge and they'd not won a game.
Yeah.
So what had changed to make that the right appointment for the club? And again, I'm not trying to do a disservice to Andy Last. I'm just saying that somebody above him who's making those decisions, how do you rationalise making a decision, appointing a coach that hasn't won a game, and then appointing them on a 2.5-year contract? They've now sacked him, and we'll have to pay up on that 2.5-year contract before they bring somebody else in.
I think you also, if we're talking about culture, and we spent a long time last week, because you weren't here, so I had to talk about it for longer than we probably would have, about what does culture mean and how do you define it, and you know, what's it based on. I think you go back to a week before the start of this season and the Joe Westerman incident broke, how poorly handled that was by the club in terms of what message are we sending out. You know, there was a 3 or 4 line press release saying we have dealt with it, without saying how they dealt with it really. And he played the first week of the season, and you just say, what does that say about us as a club, about the fact that the players can behave in whatever manner they like, because underlying the tawdriness of the video that so many people saw, what was a player doing out on a bender a week before the season started? Now, that's not in any way to talk about Joe Westerman's talent. He's clearly one of the most talented guys that we've had in recent years. He's got a fantastic pair of hands, literally, as we saw in the video, and couldn't resist. And also,
it's like the Brian Bevan episode. It's borderline, isn't it?
But also, you know, he makes loads of tackles. He's a bloke you can build a team around. But if you're going to have a culture, if you're going to seriously have the rest of the guys following the leader, which he clearly is, at points you have to discipline the leader and say, I'm sorry, but that's not what we're about. Yeah. And they didn't. And from that moment, I reckon that, you know, the season fell away, and it's just got progressively worse.
Culture to me is all about details, and all the details matter, and that's the smallest thing for the time that somebody turns up for training, whether they turn up in the right gear, how they speak to one another, how they interact on social media, whatever it may be. Everything has to run through. There has to be a constant theme that runs through everything.
Everybody
throughout the club. That's not just
yeah.
players. It's the board of directors. It's everybody involved in that club. They all know where they're heading. They all know what their standards they have to meet, etc. And that to me is what culture is about. I mean, I remember seeing some things on Salford when going back probably a couple of years, and they sort of built their culture, if you like, on the fact that they were in inverted commas, small club, small budget, but you almost play to that by saying, yeah, okay, we don't have facilities that some of the bigger clubs have, But what we do have is we have a work ethic, we have standards, etc. And by building that and everybody buying into it, and if they don't buy into it, then there's consequences for it. Then you get everybody pulling in the same direction. As soon as you get people within that group, whoever they may be, that don't, and it's allowed to continue, that's when it breaks down.
Particularly if it's your senior people.
Yeah,
it's the one where the younger kids would be looking up to.
Completely.
And I think to turn that around to a team that have done it spectacularly well, that's Lee's USP this year. We had the pleasure of speaking to Edwin Apape this afternoon, who is
I'm going to try and get that video out as quick as I can tonight.
Apart from the fact that he's a lovely man and we've got great viewing figures in PNG. Hello PNG. Hello Paul Moresby. The way he spoke about how he's been looked after at Lee, part of which clearly is to do with the Lamb family who come from the same backgrounds, the humility that he has, bearing in mind that he's been one of the star players this year, and that step up that he's made from you can be brilliant in the Championship, but to replicate that in your first year in Super League is because the people around him are giving him the kind of work ethic and support and belief and journey that they're all on together. Now, I think the issue for Lee, which you've hinted at, is this is a team that's bought for a purpose, and part of that team is going to retire. And it's the quality of the signs. I do think that re-signing Lachlan Lamb on a 2-year deal is not only fantastic for Lee, but astonishingly good for the competition, to which they, again, deserve our credit. That is a significant coup for Super League. He will have been wanted by NRL clubs. But again, I think he feels that that's an environment that he can flourish. And whilst they didn't play particularly well yesterday at Leeds, they were never going to be beaten. There's something about the way that they play and the belief that they have in each other. And again, we're talking about that. Let's compare Joe Westerman and the role model that he may not be at Castleford to the lead that John Asiata gives in the same shirt number. Everything revolves around him. You know, you're in a tough spot in a game. He'll take the carry that matters. He'll make the tackle that matters. He's not.
Don't mention his tackling because
but it's not illegal. No. But he's not demonstrative. He is a leader by example, and I think when you've got enough of those players in your team and it's sprinkled through that Lee side, then the ones who are potentially errant, who have got history of that, fall into line.
That's what I'm saying. They're not all choir boys.
No, far from it.
They're all buying in. They're all buying in to whatever they've decided as a group.
Which comes from Adrian Lamb, who is really strong.
Yeah.
And I have nothing but, if he isn't the coach of the year, then something's seriously wrong. I know Steve McNamara's done a brilliant job with Catalan, but Adrian Lamb is the totem around all of this. What all of this Lee is built, and he accepts whatever Derek Beaumont says.
Well, again, my concern is that obviously Lee not too far away from Manchester. He's been down to the old Granada studios and been in the Coronation Street props cupboard and got as much leopard print that Bet Lynch used to wear.
I think we came up with a better idea at the press conference, which we discussed with Chris Chester. I think Lee should take the field with a live leopard.
Actual leopard.
Yeah.
On a leash.
Because they haven't announced who's presenting the cup or anything.
I think it's Lindsay.
Let go of it, like they did with the bull.
No.
Let go of it like they did with the bull in Perpignan.
But Great Britain once took the field with a lion in a home test series who was prowling on the touchline on a lead, and it didn't half scare the Australians.
I mean, we could get on those news channels if we've got the leopard there, and then Just Stop Oil come on. Let the leopard go for the Just Stop. I mean, it's not what I'd do, but it will get us on like the news.
I just think that the surprise coming out of the Lee dressing room, which the captain leads a leopard out on a leash.
Do you reckon Derek wants to be a leopard, like an actual leopard? I don't want to go further.
He has an investment in a safari.
I don't want to go further with this. But.
So who's going to replace Andy Last?
Well,
not James Ford now.
The only thing we said, and it's not an original thought, is that the Sam Allardyce of rugby league is John Keir. He's from Castleford. He's worked with Craig Lingard. There is a natural synergy. They are very much attuned in their coaching philosophies. Lingard points to Keir as being his mentor, and he's available. He's a Cass icon. He's got exactly the same number of games left that Wakefield did when he went there and did a similar job, ironically, against Cass. What have you got to lose? And who else is in the market? And it has to be, again, money is an issue at Cass.
Sean Long.
And I think you need to pay somebody commensurate payment to keeping you up 4-6 games. You're not looking any further. The likelihood is if you stay up, Craig Lingard will be your coach next year. But get John Kieran, get the two of them working together, win 2 or 3 of the games that you need to win, and then look at it again.
I agree.
I can't see anybody else.
No, I agree. I think they'll make a temporary appointment to Keir to the end of the season with Lingard, and then the review at the end of the year. And I don't know what they'll do from there.
And Lingard does the coaching. Now, whether he would have to relinquish his Batley role, because at the moment he's doing 2 jobs.
Yeah, and I think once they've been to the 1895 final, you can almost imagine that happening.
You could.
Passing the reins on.
And passing it on to Mark Moxon, who's going to be taking it anyway. Yeah. And I think they're going to be involved in the playoffs. Again, it's pretty tight now that Widnes and London have sort of closed that gap. But I think Batley are going to be in the playoffs. But if they win in the 1895 and drop out of the playoffs, it'll still be a great season. Yeah. I can't see any other alternative.
I'm not getting cocky about the game coming up in a couple of weeks because I'm concerned now because people think Wakefield are favourites for it.
Well, they are because you're at home. And neither of these teams can win away.
We don't win anywhere else. But you mentioned John Keir at Wakefield. Do Castleford have a Jason Demetriou in their squad? Because as important as John Keir was off the field,
well, they're going to have a Blake Austin.
Demetriou was a proper leader in some bad times off the field with players passing away and such. So a real galvanising force.
He will find a reason, and his reason may well be he is Mr. Cass, and how much it means to the town, and all. He might be able to get that extra few percent out of the players that are there, but a lot is going to hinge on Blake Austin because clearly they haven't bought him not to play him. So they're going to have to use him as the guy that everything goes around. And I'm told that one of the reasons he has ended up at Castleford is because he's very close friends with Gareth Widdop from when they were at Warrington together. And when Widdop heard that Austin was dissatisfied with perhaps not being offered a deal at Leeds for next year and his management were looking to try and get him out of Headingley, that it was Widdop that was partly involved in saying, if he's available, we should go for it. Well, that Widdop-Austin link-up, it just could be vital for 6 games. They don't have to produce anything more than maybe winning 3 of them.
And Gary Hetherington helping Cass out because he's Cass lad.
He's also
that's the other conspiracy.
I don't think he's helping them out. I think.
What are you saying about Blake Austin?
No, I think he's. I think the coach at Leeds, if he indeed is the one who makes the recruitment decisions, which is another issue, has decided that he's next season he wants a different half-back partnership because he inherited the one that he's had for most of this year. Now it leaves Leeds really short for the remainder of this season.
But you're not going to win anything anyway, so.
Well, I'm not.
Well, no, you're not. You're Leeds on this point. You are. You're the personification. You are Ronnie the Rhino. I'm going to get the head. Bring it in.
What will also be interesting is whether Leeds let Luke Hooley play for Batley in the 1895 Cup, and I suspect they're not going to. I think that.
Come on!
I think that Craig Lingard suspects that as well.
Oh, come on, Leeds!
That's just what I was thinking when I was watching the game on last night. When I was watching it, and I thought, is he going to play?
Oh.
The problem, I think,
they've got a week off. Why can he not play?
Well, because they haven't got Richie Myler.
Because Richie Myler is buggered,
And being a Leeds player and being paid by Leeds, then Leeds will look at, well, who have we got going into our next 3 or 4 games if Myler isn't there? Want to give Luke Hooley a run. Can you imagine the resentment that would cause for Luke Hooley as a player if Leeds turned around and said, we're going to deny you perhaps the only chance you're going to get in your career to play at Wembley? I'd let him play.
I agree.
He could get injured in training. He could get injured walking down the street.
Of course he could, yeah.
Steve says, Justin Morgan for Cass. Why is Justin Morgan being linked with all these jobs 10 years after his last...
Justin Morgan won't get appointed. I can't see Justin Morgan.
I don't think he'd get a visa quickly enough to come over here. They need somebody who'll take training.
There's only one appointment for me, and that's John Keir.
Yeah.
And it's till the end of the year.
Have local media interviewed Dave Woods yet? Not Dave Woods off the telly. Not Dave Woods, the other Dave Woods. Because they linked him with the job earlier in the year.
Adrian Vowles would be fantastic for Cass, but he's not going to get here in time. And if they get relegated, it doesn't matter who they're in the market for. I can't see them coming back if they get relegated from the Championship. I think they would be behind so many other clubs in terms of the grading criteria, never mind not being able to afford a squad that would be as competitive as, say, a Toulouse if they're left in that division, or Bradford in the direction that they're going. I just think they would have to prepare themselves for a period of time in the Championship while they did all the other stuff around the club that they're going to need to do, if indeed they've got the money to do that and the current owners have the will to do that. So I think they can't be linked with anybody other than someone who can start tomorrow.
You can't get Dave Woods off the telly. He can't be cheap enough, can he?
He could start tomorrow.
He's
got the cup this week.
After the cup fight.
I think that's what potentially makes that Wakefield Cast game an even bigger game than it was arguably in 2006. I mean, I touched that game in 2006, and it was obviously the last game of the season, so there was no other opportunities to gain points, which clearly there is in this game.
Which is why this shouldn't be called the £1 million game,
no,
because there's 5 games after it that could change the picture. The thing is, that is a game that has to be won if you're Castleford. You have to go to Wakefield and dent their current very good home record by winning that game, because not only do you go 2 points ahead of them, but psychologically that is massive. Now, who is the guy who you're going to get in the dressing room? And this is exactly why it equates to what we were saying about Sam Burgess. Sam Burgess walks into a dressing room and says, "You know me, I'm Sam Burgess." You go, "Yeah." John Keir walks into that Castleford dressing room and cries his eyes out because it could be the death knell of Castleford if you guys don't put everything on the line for me. And they win that game at Wakefield. He's a part of the way to doing the job.
And he's got the man, Scully. Must rate himself as the favourite. He's going to play what's in front of him, vision and awareness.
I have to say, he's not loved at Castleford.
Tackle, kick, pass, run, whatever else he says.
He once was denied a try at Castleford, which he's never forgiven the referee that day for.
Who was that?
I can't remember who the referee was, but I think it was Colin Morris possibly. But I think he intercepted a ball and was called back for offside.
Oh.
He got sin-binned. He's
Sin-binned?
Don't like the lane.
Not for dissent again.
Don't like the lane.
No.
They don't like him.
Who does? No. Why don't the coaches make recruitment decisions at clubs? Madness, asked Kevin.
Yeah, but does it happen in football?
Now there's the director of football.
The money men, directors of football, the coach will always be asked, I think. There'll be input because they've got to coach the person. But if a club want to get someone, then the club will initiate that. I know from talking to Brian McDermott, for example, that he identified some players that he wanted when he could see that that great Leeds team was starting to come to an end. In fact, I don't know if it's common knowledge, I'm not breaking a confidence, but he wanted Jared Warrea-Hargreaves to replace Jamie Peacock. So he can recommend that to the club, but if the club can't do a deal or Warrea-Hargreaves falls outside of the pay structure, it's not going to happen. And I think that's just how it works. In a salary cap sport, some of the decision making has to be from what's the bigger picture. It can't be, we need a halfback, I want him. It's like, well, how does that fit in?
I think that's obvious, but I think what that person's trying to suggest is what it almost seems like there is even zero consultation with the coach.
I don't think it's zero.
And they're just being bought.
It's not zero.
No, I'm sure it's not.
But it's not quite as simple as in the old days. Leeds sell Blake Austin, and funnily, Johnny Lomax is lining up in a Leeds shirt because Jack Myerscough has just said, "Who's the best standoff in the game?" And, well, what's that Australian at Salford? Croft. Yeah, how much does he want? And what's the transfer fee? Yes, he's here.
Yeah,
you can't do that anymore. No. And the coach, who do you want? It's not like that.
We do need to.
By the way, Jack Myerscough didn't speak like that. I don't know why I did that.
We do need to. Well, Sky doesn't sound like my president. But we need to find out if the women of Leeds are going to get a double bonus if they win the cup. Because you almost promised it to them, haven't you?
Well, I think they deserve it.
I don't think you've got that power, but
that's how it works.
I think
when it gets to the Challenge Cup, the chairman or the director of football walks in and goes, "Right, what we're doing today? You're on 50, it's 100. Just make sure you win." And there's a free round behind the bar.
Have we done all the coaching bits? Is there any other issues arising?
Did you cover? I think we've done all the coaching bits.
Alan Coleman.
Oh yeah, a witness.
Going from Swinton.
Yes.
Good man.
I just wanted to come on to a question from Kevin, which I'm going to try and reword. But it refers to people have already asked about the Salford St Helens game, so it kind of moves us into that match. Question for James, asked Kevin. Is the level of refereeing suffering because of the vacuum at the top of the head of refereeing department?
Because you're not there.
That's definitely not what he asked.
No, because there isn't the person in the role isn't there at the moment.
I suppose that's difficult for me to comment, isn't it? Because I'm not there.
But does that affect the level of...
No, I don't think it does, really. I think generally the referees have refereed well this year. Yes, there's been, for the last few weeks, there have been 1 or 2 games. But, look, we're getting towards the end of the season. You know, these games are becoming more and more important because there's fewer games left. And so, therefore, inevitably, when the games are as close as they are, generally at the moment, and teams can all beat each other...
Apart from Whitefield and Castle.
Yeah.
0-0 draw.
Who can only beat each other.
Inevitably, the focus will increasingly come on a referee, and as you get towards the end of the season, as I said, because the points matter, and you know, taking Paul Rowe for example, look, they've lost 7 games on the bounce.
Yep.
You might say that he was trying to divert attention. I think he would say he was genuinely being straight down the line. That's what he thought, and I'm not suggesting he doesn't think that, but is it reality? There's a couple of decisions in that game which, you could possibly argue either way. If there's a video referee, then there may be a different outcome. But there isn't a video referee. Referees and touch judges have to make decisions live, and they have one shot at it. Is it because there isn't a boss? Well, there is a boss. Dave Elliott is in temporary charge. Yes, no decision has been taken as to what is happening with Steve Ganson. Everybody's aware of that. Does that create a little bit of a vacuum? Maybe, because there isn't that long-term planning about, talking to go back to clubs. Dave Elliott won't know whether he's going to remain in charge if Steve's not going to come back, or he doesn't know if Steve's going to come back, he takes over again. No one knows. Until you do know, you just have to deal with what you've got. But the fundamentals of how you referee a game won't have changed. They won't have changed significantly from where they were under Steve Ganson.
But isn't it also about allowing new talent to come through? Because some senior guys have gone in the recent past, then you can't replace them with other senior guys. The junior guys coming through, the ones with perceived and identified talent, have to make those mistakes in the same way that players have to make mistakes to get the experience to not make those mistakes. You don't. I mean, this is the argument again, going back to supporters who are incredibly disgruntled with Leeds at the moment, and yes, I think they shouldn't be 9th in the table, but you don't start with a finished article.
You don't, but I would say, for everybody waxes lyrical about Jack Wellesby for obvious reasons, but he's prone to mistakes.
Yes, he's just brilliant,
and he's one of the world's best players. So you could have one of the world's best referees, and he will still make mistakes because that's just reality. But what you're talking about is consistency. Will you get consistent performance from that referee week in, week out? That's what you'd like to get. And the better the referee, the more experienced the referee, the more likely you are to get a more consistent performance week in, week out.
But also, as you mentioned about whether it would have been referred to a video referee or not, if the cameras had been at Salford and St Helens, and Salford had got more of the decisions that they feel they should have done, and the cameras weren't at Leeds and Leigh, then Jared O'Connor's second try would have been awarded.
Yeah.
Because it went up as a try. So if you didn't have the capability to review that, and clearly he has dropped the ball, it was the right decision to be overruled, then we wouldn't have been talking about Salford and St Helens. We'd have been talking about Adrian Lamb's upset because maybe that would have levelled the game up. Maybe they might have lost.
But the reality is, if that's not on TV, you wouldn't be able to determine that from the single camera that you've got. Exactly. Now, on the Salford game, the touch call, that a video referee could not assist with that decision. If it was on TV, they can't assist with it. They could have assisted with the St Helens try, whether it was or wasn't a knock on. I get that. Look, I don't know.
But there was some debate on social media today about whether Salford's first try through Callum Watkins had an offside. You can debate
an obstruction.
Yeah, you can debate it till the cows come home.
I've seen.
You've just got to deal with. We talked about Salford the other week, didn't we? Where there was concern about refereeing decisions going against them, and yet they conceded a try whereby 2 of their players couldn't pick the ball up. There's enough things in the 80 minutes that are within your gift to determine the outcome of a game than the 2 or 3 things that go against you that don't.
Stop the programme. Breaking news. Sam Burgess appointed as Warrington head coach on a 2-year contract.
So your friend was right with the Qantas pilot.
Yeah,
he must have flown you.
Andy, well done. Warrington Wolves, the banter years. That's what people in football would call it. You can't talk
Have they
about
said who's coming with him? Because
not yet. That's just a Sky Sports thing. I'm not on Warrington's media list, so I don't know. But I was busy looking at the charts to see where we were.
In Mexico.
Yeah, we're still number one in Mexico in rugby league, but we're behind James Graham in Turkey. So pull your fingers out.
No, I would just say on
sorry.
Paul Rowley, the other week he probably did have an argument with. There was a try, and I think when they played Lee, that wasn't a try. And again, that would have gone to video referee. Had there been a video referee, and you would have got the right outcome. A mistake was made, and I think it was a poor mistake. There was a mistake again at Salford where I think it was Wigan that got a try. Can't remember. There was a tackle in the air that was clearly missed, and unfortunately, that was Jack Smith that was a touch judge on that occasion. But Robert Hicks and I finished at the end of last year. One of the downsides of the structure that they've got, in my view, by having full-time referees, is that it makes it difficult to bring somebody in who's not a full-time referee to referee into Super League. So you've almost got to be a full-time referee to referee in Super League. And therefore, one of Rowley's arguments was about making it a job that's attractive in financial terms. And look, you don't go into refereeing for financial reasons, but ultimately, if you have a job that pays you good money, as Gareth Hewer did, he made the choice that he didn't want to become a full-time referee because he worked at Sellafield. And so he continued, and he did referee in Super League now and then. He refereed a Challenge Cup final, but he wasn't refereeing Super League consistently. And I think if you compare it to, say, Rugby Union use both part-time and full-time referees in their Premiership competition. It's whether they could do that, but unfortunately at the moment they can't do that in any event because they don't really have the strength in depth in terms of experience. So there's been an awful lot of officials finished over the last few years, and they don't grow on trees.
Which goes back to what we were saying about when St Helens have to regenerate their team, that Leeds have to.
Yeah.
Do you want the final part of the Warrington story, which for those people listening to the podcast, we already know?
Yeah.
As part of the review of the rugby department, Gary Chambers will be promoted to Director of Rugby. He will have an overarching responsibility for the rugby department from the first team downwards. Chambers will remain in interim charge for the remainder of the 2023 season before taking up his role. Richard Marshall will remain as an assistant coach, with a further update about a second assistant coach to be announced in due course.
Bracket Sean Long.
Sean Long. Yeah.
Well, I suspect it'll be Jason Clark. There you are.
And the Warrington Circus rolls on, says Paul. I mean, we all hope he's successful.
And
he's
it
not
would
an
also
Sam
be great
Burgess
for the game if somebody like Sam Burgess coming back into it raises our media profile and he's successful.
Hashtag blame Burgess, yeah.
Yeah.
Former Bath Rugby Union player joined the Super League club as coach. It's just utterly bizarre. Steve Mascord has been on. What are you doing?
Has he not got anything better to say?
I do imagine he just sits in front of. He's sat in front of his laptop with a lot of boxes of stuff around him.
Last I heard he was in Sweden.
Again, knee-jerk mid-season decisions made by man-children. It's not women children because they make the right decision. Man-children. He said a lot of things, so I'm going to read them. British fans see themselves as essential stakeholders and promotion and relegation as pure sport. Yet the opposite is true to me. The clubs are the playthings of the least poor person in town. These three sackings are the acts of people playing drunken darts during a locking at their own pub. The customers are completely irrelevant. Would these owners do this in their day job businesses? Imagine if Trent Robinson were sat before his press conference. Nick Poultice would be a laughingstock, considered senile. Steve Mascott, man of words.
Beautifully written.
I love Steve.
Perfectly
Mascott.
right.
I know he's at Wembley as a fan this week, so I hope he enjoys it. If you've not seen why he's at Wembley, go check his Twitter out. It's interesting, but
one final comment, and we will move on from referees.
That's okay.
Just on the Rowley thing,
yes.
Is that the other comment he made about basically by paying referees and trying to recruit them, his comments do the exact opposite of trying to recruit referees. So, and ultimately there are channels that he should have gone through in order to do it. So I think he'd obviously just got frustrated. I'm certainly will.
I thought
and people will say, well, what about Paul Wellens and his comments? I think they're different. I think they're entirely different.
I thought he was almost defamatory about Jack Smith.
Yeah, I thought they were disgraceful, to be honest. And even if mistakes were made, and I'm not suggesting that they were, but even if they were made, I don't think it merits that outburst.
And I always say, would he go in a press conference? This is of any coach. We're not picking on Salford here or Paul Rowley. Would he say player X is a disgrace on his own side, or the other team's coach? It's too easy to.
Well, he certainly didn't say about Sneed the other week when Sneed, kicked the goal line dropout into touch and it went out on the full, and they can't remember who they played that week. They got 2 points off the back of it, didn't they? You know, I mean,
it's one of the very rare Leeds wins.
Leeds. Yeah. I flabbergasted of all the new. We've not even talked about the World Cup, which is probably going to be in 2026.
We haven't even talked about Huddersfield's women, who picked up an astonishing win.
Amazing. Go listen to Amelia Brown, because she's a star of the future in terms of she's one of those proper try-scoring wingers.
Brilliant hat-trick.
Yep.
Fabulous finisher.
I think I saw her score 4 or 5 against Wakefield a couple of years ago, and thought she was somebody else. So that was good when I was on Twitter doing that. But
you don't normally interview people and think they're somebody else.
No. And I'm going to leave it in. I called Simon Great Scott earlier, but because long-term listeners of this program will know exactly why I've done that. It won't be Warrington's year next year either, says Steve. Oh, come on, Steve. Come on. What if he is the missing piece of the puzzle? It's certainly one that will get lots of publicity, and I would certainly come from the opinion that, you know how...
Can we expect Russell Crowe at Warrington?
You know how Derek Beaumont is everywhere, and he's always everywhere. Win or lose, he's around, isn't he? He's always front and centre. And
he's got a profile.
And you can have your opinions on him. I'm not a massive fan of everything he does, but obviously he's doing a great job for the club itself, and they're at Wembley, they're doing so well this year. This might be their only chance of winning. And when we talk about their team for next year, it doesn't matter because they will always have this. But win or lose, he's there. He is front and centre. He is the public face of Lee Leopards. You can't say that for Warrington and their CEO, who was everywhere at the start of the season when they're winning. He's on telly, he's on podcasts. Why he was on the Super League podcast, I've got no idea. Taking
select media out for a meal.
He's everywhere, and they're losing, and he's not everywhere. Which games do we want to talk? We talked about a few of them. I mean, there's nothing we can't talk about Hull Wakefield because we weren't there. We were both at Leeds.
Neither were Wakefield.
No, so Wakefield don't win away. And we were off the bottom of the table for 2 days, and now we're back bottom again. Terrible. Sat the coach.
Hull KR found a whole new team.
Well, they should be fined. They should be fined. And
they've earned the right.
I would have done the exact same thing because
it's really interesting going into the final that the teams that picked predominantly their first teams won, and the teams that made wholesale changes predominantly lost. Now, Batley didn't make too many changes, but again, talking to Craig Lingard this afternoon, clearly a lot of them had their mind on what's coming, which is perfectly understandable. But Halifax were the opposite. It's like, we're going to go out and beat the league leaders because we want to take that form into the final. So 3 teams are taking great form into the final. 3 decided that the occasion was more important and allowed that to dominate. I mean, I know that Lois Forsell was really upset with the way that Leeds women played, but they've drawn a line under that and said no, it would be a different team playing at Wembley, and
you're more interested to look at the track record for those teams that have done that, and then the result the week after.
Yeah, I think in terms of fining, I can remember Doug Lawton as Scoey's best mate, sending an entire reserve Leeds team, I think it was to St Helens, getting beaten by over 60 the week before going to Wembley. Got fined, and there was huge outcry. And he basically said, "I don't care. We're going to Wembley next week."
But isn't this why they introduced the 21-man squads? Because it went back
just to stop.
We're going back to Sean.
I just think Hull KR earned the right to do that.
Yeah,
and if they wanted to sacrifice effectively 2 points, which has put them nearer to the edge of the playoffs, that's their inalienable right to do so.
Yeah.
I also think that Wigan need a lot of credit for the manner in which they went about winning that game, because that's that is a complete no-win situation. If you win by 60, well, you should have won by 60. If you only win by 30, you didn't take it seriously enough. They did the job that was expected of them. I also want to praise Lee, which I think Rowan Smith did, for saying
he did.
Kept the integrity of the competition forward. Now, forget whether Lee had
which is a dig at Hull KR according to the papers today.
No, it's not. Forget why. Lee have a very small squad. They have very little manoeuvrability.
They do, but I did go on the website to have a look at their squad. They do have some. They could have made enough changes to protect some of their key players, and they chose not to do that.
He also spoke about what they are, who they are, their DNA, the whole culture thing, which is why I think he's done a brilliant job. And he wanted to keep as many of his players out there as he could, because they want to take whatever they've got inside their bubble into Wembley, because they felt that was important. So those contrasting ways of approaching the final make even more great storylines and more exciting about these games coming up. I think the other thing, just very briefly on the Leeds and Lee game, I do think it was a poor game, but the criticism that Leeds got for lack of creativity, Lee scored 2 tries in exactly the same manner that Leeds did. There was no more creativity in the Lee team than there was the Leeds team. Very, very easy to, Aaron Smith's not the man, and the team are disappointed and everything. Even Adrian Lamb said in his press conference that Leeds had a difficult week to lose 2 senior guys out of the spine of that Lee spine has played together more than any other team this year, and it's no coincidence that they know their jobs to absolute perfection. When you, and I'm not going to make an excuse for Leeds, they should not be where they are in the table, but they have plus 57 and only 18 points. They're in virtually every single game they've played this year. They're just not quite good enough to turn those matches within almost one score from defeats to victories, but they're not a million miles away.
You two have real lives, so you will not have spent...
Why do you have a pretend life?
Yeah, I mean, since 1993, I've been playing Football Manager and Championship Manager. And...
Oh, I thought you said wives, not lives.
Well, wives as well. Well, no, partners.
Because I definitely don't have a wife.
I didn't know where that was going.
Although I do sometimes say to Stephen, I may as well have married a woman. But anyway, that's a different subject.
Different podcast. There was pride in Leeds.
I am the manager of Dundalk and have been for 6 years now, not in real time in this game. When I come up into a match in the Champions League and they've got a rubbish game against Derry City the week before, stick the reserves out. So I would do exactly what Willie Peters did.
I don't think they should be fined. I really don't think they should be fined.
But should the RFL be seen to?
No.
Fair enough.
I think those days are gone.
The listeners will understand.
I'm looking forward to the press release about your mutual consent departure.
Oh, when I got sacked by Athletic Club of Bilbao, it was disgraceful. Is there anything else to talk about the games in the Super League?
No, I don't think so.
We had League One, Championship. Barrow 6, London 26. Batley 6, Bradford.
Getting tough for Barrow to play 2 games in 6 days.
Having won at Bradford, then Bradford went.
But that was an astonishing result that we didn't get time to reflect on. That Barrow won at Bradford. Amazing.
Halifax beat Fev. Coach Sacco, Simon Griggs, got his name right this time.
Winners also leaving at the end of the season.
Everyone's going everywhere, aren't they? Winners won at Newcastle. Swinton beat Keighley.
But you see the crowd at Newcastle.
Yeah,
I just wanted to make mention of that they had a real big community day. They had a festival. They had the North East Men's Premier League Grand Final. They really involved the community in that. And yes, they got heavily beaten. They're not quite out of it yet in terms of trying to get out of relegation. They still need to find 2 more wins than anybody that's about them. But 2,000 on a Saturday afternoon, it's a good crowd.
Mark Aston will be glad he's not at Featherstone. Not for the first time in his career.
I don't think he'll want to go to Whitehaven again.
No, it's only 220. Eagles are in a bit of a wobble, aren't they? But they still...
Didn't Whitehaven beat Sheffield at Sheffield? Remarkable. Terrible news for Keighley though, because they're now second from bottom
and a point off Barrow.
And worse points, very bad points. It was over 100 points more.
That was a massive win for Swinton.
Yeah,
absolutely enormous. And again, I think that.
And the result for Whitehaven was even worse than for the teams around them, because the Whitehaven are now on what they're on 16 points, so a couple of points ahead of Swinton.
I reckon York, even though they held Toulouse close, are in a run at the moment, but they're not going to get dragged into it with 18.
There's fewer clubs in that contention at the bottom. You're basically, I think, from 10th down to 14th. Whitehaven, Swinton, Barrow, Keighley, Newcastle. Those are your clubs, but with 2-point gap from 16 to 14 down to Whitehaven down to Swinton. Pressure's on those sides at the bottom, is it? Keith and Barrow, Swinton.
Barrow's points difference is very good if it comes down to that as well.
I think we've so much to talk about. I would talk about the TV deal, but apparently it's going to be announced soon. Or there's going to be news coming out soon.
Mid-July, end of July, we're now in August.
Week after next, we were told.
So I'll talk about streaming and stuff next week because there's too much stuff going on.
Well, we think it will be next week that it's announced. So
makes sense.
What do we know?
Don't know anything. League One.
Another coach that we didn't mention, Oldham.
Yes, Mike Ford's in. Stuart Littler's out.
Stuart Littler's gone. Yeah.
Who I thought might go to Widnes. Yeah. In fact, it's Alan Coleman.
Yeah. Could go to Fev.
Could go to Swinton.
Could go to Swinton.
Can't go to
merry-go-round.
But again, that's the owner putting himself in charge.
Yeah.
I mean, at least.
But I get that because it's a new owner. It's
yes.
a new owner who didn't appoint him, so that's different circumstances, I would suggest. But
was that mutual consent?
Probably. Oldham won at Cornwall. Dewsbury beat Workington. They are the champions. Congratulations, Dewsbury. Did they get one of those shields that is in Nigel's old office? Did they take those from Redhall to wherever it is in Manchester? The Hurricanes beat the Scholars. Go on, the Hurricanes. North Wales 28, Doncaster 22, and Rochdale 22, Hunslet 35. Mentioning Rochdale's reminding me, Abigail, our fan. I mean, she likes me and Phil. Anyway,
well, I don't know about me.
She's not met you yet, James, but she's got her first try. She's got her first try this weekend. So well done, Abigail. One day maybe you will be at Wembley, which we do need to talk about.
Watch the women's game, Abigail, or she'll be even more inspired.
In the Women's Super League this week, Huddersfield upset Leeds, and the scoreline flattered Leeds, 20 points to 16.
And yet, if Leeds had kicked some goals, they probably would have won it, but they didn't deserve to.
No, and I had to make sure that Amelia went in to do the team song because they were starting singing it while she was out there talking to me. I said, "No, go in there, come back. I'm not going anywhere." York beat.
But they remembered it was.
I know. 2 years, I think, since their last one in Super League. So, well done them. York beat Warrington 58-10. York have got a new team song after their games apparently because they put a video up of it. Barrow beat Cass 76-0. Featherstone overcame Lee 20 points to 16, and Salford beat Bradford 30 points to 4. Good season for Salford.
And Saints beat Wigan.
Yeah, and Saints beat Wigan. We like Salford, and they are. There's a gap as much as there's a gap at the top of between the top and the bottom of Group 1. I hadn't realised how big the gap was in Group 2 as well, between the top 4 in Bradford and Cass. But should we talk about Wembley? Because should we mention the World Cup first?
I was going to say the international game is worthy of mention because it was quite a significant announcement from Singapore. The proof of the pudding.
We should have got Troy Grant on Twitter. I mean,
he's standing down.
Yeah, I know, but he replies to everything on Twitter, which he shouldn't do. I mean, it's all well and good saying we're coming here and we're doing this and we're doing that, but we've all seen artist impressions of stadiums that haven't been built.
The headlines of it are. We know now that the World Cup will be in 2026 in the Southern Hemisphere. We know that the women's and the wheelchair will be unaffected. The men's will go down from 16 teams to 10 teams. The women will then have their own standalone World Cup in 2028, and eligibility for the men's World Cup, you will have to be of full member status to play. Behind that, and leading into the revised international calendar, is that they want to beef up regional qualifying to give as many nations as they can the chance to play in something called the World Series, which is undefined, where it's going to be, who's going to play in it, who's going to cost it, that kind of thing. But the idea would be to give those nations the chance to not only play each other in meaningful games, but to get up to full member status. They're playing something under the World Cup to become qualifiers for the last 2 spots in the men. This is only men. You don't have to be a full member to play in the Women's World Cup.
Are there current full members who do not deserve, but they don't live up to the criteria of full members?
Yes.
So will the IRL will they reduce their membership?
What they have to do is there is a parallel here to bringing in grading. It has to work 2 ways. That if you don't live up to the grading, you have to. That's how we get promotion relegation. Yeah. So yes, fulfil enough criteria, you'll get promoted, but don't, and you get relegated. So I think. Again, if they're serious about using full membership status and then moving into world ranking, which will say you've got to play games to maintain your world ranking rather than play once every 4 years and you can still be number 6 in the world. you have to then apply that across the board. So what do you need to be a full member? And it isn't just, I mean, again, without going into too much detail, it's not just about the amount of domestic competition played. You have to be a recognised sport. So, for example, Scotland are full members because they get Sport Scotland funding, because rugby league is recognised as a full professional sport in that country. Greece at the moment don't get that level of funding, which is why they can't be full members at the moment. But they know now what they need to aspire to. But the other thing about all of this, we want to encourage more nations to play. We want to have more commodities that we can sell and get more money into the sport to put into the nations that are developing rather than the elite nation, but we want to sell it through the elite nations. Is tours are back. So, 2024 it's likely that Samoa will come here. 2025 the men and women will go to Australia. 2026 will be a World Cup. 2027 the Kiwis will come here. 2028 the Kangaroos will come here.
Can't we swap those two around, because the Kiwis always come. The Australians haven't been here for donkey's years.
That's the plan, and I think a lot of bilateral agreements between others. We'll get Tri-and-Four Nations tournaments. They still haven't announced that there will be 2 levels of Tri-Nations in the Southern Hemisphere this autumn because of the CBA isn't solved yet, but there will be. It might even come out this week. So I think it'll be Australia, New Zealand and Samoa will play while Tonga are over here, and then PNG, Fiji, possibly the Cook Islands will play a Tri-Nation simultaneously, but at the lower tier.
So it's an emerging nations, and kind of not emerging nations because they're not emerging.
Yeah, I think tier 1 nations and tier 2 nations. Although it's not exact.
Yeah.
But something saleable so that Australia can play New Zealand, men's and women's, and likely possibly be in New Zealand as well. So a lot of announcements, some of which are great. Tours are back, brilliant. If we can plan that far ahead, fantastic.
Did the French do us in extending the World Cup when they couldn't manage it? Which means we've had to go backwards.
I think the issue as well is that the World Cup that we so enjoyed didn't make any money.
And the World Cup we had and enjoyed was propped up by the government.
Yeah,
and without that money,
it will come out. But if the government hadn't financed it, it wouldn't have been sustainable. So I think we set a template there, which is brilliant, and that template for the next World Cup is being carried on. But we with the greatest, it's an article that's just been written for the next 40-20. With the greatest respect through a nation like, for example, Jamaica, there hasn't been an obvious spin-off of being in the World Cup. It's fantastic they were here. It was a great story. We want them to play internationals. We want them to continually be able to get to the point where they can qualify for a World Cup. But being in the World Cup was just nice for the period of time that they were in the World Cup. And that's because there's not enough money in the sport. There isn't even a pitch they can call their own in Jamaica, and you would have hoped that maybe out of the World Cup that would have been a legacy of it. So a lot to take in. Read all about it in the next issue of 4020.
There's a lot of similarities with the Commonwealth Games situation, isn't there?
About that.
And the Rugby League World Cup.
Yep.
So many similarities. I think people shouldn't get lost in the fact that it's Rugby League and it's putting on major tournaments is incredibly expensive.
And that appears to be in a much more perilous position than we are.
Yeah, no, I think also with less teams playing in it, you concertina the amount of time it's playing, which saves money.
I think you get better quality games. I think when they had a structure where you had, I can't remember what it was it a 4-team? You had the sort of the
super group,
the super group, and then the other groups. I think that was a much better structure. I think that was 2008 World Cup.
Yeah, that's what
and that worked really well because you had really good contests, and you had good contests in those other two.
Well, I think again that the whole idea is to find something that's saleable, and I do think, even though they might not be directly involved, that IMG have always stated that internationals were very important and promoting them. I think they can only promote what is a minority sport in an international level if you're only seeing elite games, and you branch out from that. So I think it was perfectly commendable that we did what we did, and we got some great storylines. But as again Troy Grant was saying, Greece losing 90-0 is fine for that moment that they lose 90-0, but how does that help the Greek team being in the World Cup? They need to play a number of games against opponents where they've got the chance. You know, they need to be playing Serbia and Italy.
But that's obvious to anybody.
Yeah.
You don't need to run a World Cup to work that out.
Yeah.
That's what I don't understand. That's
do you want to
obvious.
take over the IRL?
Well, I certainly don't. But that just seems obvious to me. So I don't know how they've ended up going down that road, and then
the French wanted to expand on that.
Yeah, but that's because the IRL doesn't have teeth.
But it might if it had some money.
And that's what it all comes back to. It all comes back to money.
Yes.
And back to money.
The other word coming back from Singapore was that a very important player in what has been agreed and discussed was Peter V'landys, and he has a real commitment to the best of the international game to promote it and bring money in, and then he's absolutely passionate about filtering that down.
But that's inevitable because he's...
But they haven't had that support from the NRL.
No, but
many occasions.
And that's ultimately why you end up with the calendar, because basically the NRL are on board.
Yes, yeah.
And it all relies on the
and
NRL.
And they also produce most of the players for Tonga and Samoa.
And I think, Richard, you were right that we've had calendars issued before that haven't come to fruition.
I think these calendars will, and that's a step forward. I think the nebulous bit is the World Series and the region.
I would just say though, on the press release, it was a really confusing press release.
I had nothing to do.
No, I know you didn't, which is why I'm saying, because I know you're involved in the European Rugby League, but you're not involved in the IRL. But I had to sort of write down and try and work out what they were actually saying.
Read a 2,500 word piece in the next 40 to 20
that will
minutes.
tell me.
Explain it.
Marvellous.
Kev's going. Kev, thanks for watching. Enjoy your week. Thanks for
commenting.
I know we've gone on a bit. We've gone
so
on.
much,
I mean, we used to do 2 hours, didn't we? So we're shortchanging you overall. But so much has happened this week. So much has happened. It's been absolutely ridiculous. Just final thing on the internationals. I imagine the Wheelchair World Cup would make financial sense to be played up here, whether in France or England, because with the best in the world to take everyone over to Australia.
Well, they're going to review it after 2026, where they clearly are going to play in wherever the host is in the Southern Hemisphere. And it may well be that it's played at the same time as the men's, but not in the same place. Which makes perfect sense.
Like was it the Melbourne Olympics in the 50s where the show jumping was held in Stockholm or something?
There you go.
After last week's Segar Bastard thing, I've got to throw in these ridiculous parts of sport.
Can't remember the name of which Grips is interviewing, but he knows a
Segar
Bastard.
I mean, I did think when I'm interviewing Caitlin Beavis, do I say? No, but I thought no, because Wembley is upon us. Are you going to be there at 10:10 to watch the Skulls final?
Except you can't get in.
Except you can't get in
till 11.
No,
if you're in the media.
It's a full day. I'm looking forward to it. I mean, I'm working all week. I'm really excited. God knows what I'm going to do with the editing this week and stuff. But I'm excited. I can't wait. 3 games which I have no idea who's going to win them, which is brilliant. Who's going to win?
Genuinely
don't know. I was just going to say, because you don't know, we have to do predictions.
Do we? No,
unless there's anything. Is there anything else out there?
We are really lucky, aren't we? Because we went to Brighouse this afternoon.
Yes.
This is Monday for those listening on the podcast, and we got access to people from every team, be they coaches, players. And I left that room thinking, not only are we very fortunate with the accessibility of everybody, and it wouldn't happen in another sport, but I now know even less about who I think is going to win. Yeah. And I'm quite happy to just say I have no idea. Let's all watch and enjoy it and come back.
So what are the bookies saying?
Well, I'll tell you. If anyone's been on the Wembley tour, can you do they still have big baths in the changing rooms? That's the big question I've come up with today.
You asked that.
I did ask a player
because it's a long time ago since.
Surely they've got individual showers.
They have individual showers, but I don't know whether they'll have. So like at Tottenham Hotspur's ground, they'd have the big ice bath, for example. Right.
He wants to know if they're going to be
giving
pints of milk to drink in the bath.
Mind you, the lid doesn't come off the cup anymore, does it? Which is a massive disappointment. I'm going to go with the sponsors, which I shouldn't do really, should I? Because I work for one of their rivals, but they sponsor the competition. So
it was in last week.
Was it in last week's? I'm just trying to find where it is on their website.
And I think with Halifax's performance against Featherstone this weekend as well, I don't know how much.
I don't know. I think you can make a case for every team, which is fantastic. Saints are already twice holders of the Women's Challenge Cup. They don't want to let it go. Leeds are just a team that know how to play finals.
Yeah.
Who's going to win that? No idea. Lee have got...
of all the 3 games, I think the women's game, I think St Helens will win.
Right. the men's game, Lee have got something about them this year.
Yeah, it could go either way. That.
But Hull KR are a team that are so together that I wouldn't put it. They also have, and they won't mention it much, but it will be in the back of their minds, particularly for some of the players who played in it. They need to vanquish the memory of 2015.
Yeah.
So there's two great stories there. Can Lee come up from the Championship, winning the 1895 Cup, to then winning the Challenge Cup? Unbelievable story. And then you look at the 1895 Cup, you go, well, Halifax obviously are in tremendous form to have got Sean Long sacked. And Batley have built their whole season around getting to Wembley. And getting to Wembley is not enough for them. Knowing Craig Lingard, it will be...
I think that's why, if I was going to say, I would think Lee Batley as St Helens will be right. But
I just think you're a very brave man.
Yeah, I agree. I could get all three wrong because we had the same conversation on the semi-finals, and I think I got 2 out of the 6 right. So who knows?
I think more importantly, 60,000 people are earmarked to go, which is 10,000 up on last year.
And is that partly because we've got different teams there, and also partly because
more neutrals? Yeah,
people. It's new clubs there that are clubs that haven't been there for a while, and people don't know who's going to win.
But also clubs that are liked as second clubs. You know, with the greatest respect to, if it had been a Saints-Wigan final, you would not have got Warrington and Leeds fans going.
No.
But I think there's a lot of people going, Lee Hall, I think I'd quite like to be there and watch that. I know I can have another 2 games as well for the same £25, then brilliant. No, I do think that there'll be more neutrals, that the buy-in from all of the competing clubs will probably even be higher than some of the established clubs, because they, as you say, haven't been there for so long. Hull KR haven't won it since 86. They haven't won it since 71. Fantastic, isn't it? Brilliant.
And everyone forgets Hull KR winning the Silk Cup plate because no one remembers the Silk Cup plate.
1997.
Yeah, against
Hunslet,
wasn't
was
it?
it a bomb scare?
Bomb scare.
Was it? Yeah. I was on the school trip and we were stood outside waiting.
And they had to get changed in the Wembley Conference Centre. We got stuck in there. Missed the main game. Well, not missed most of the main game.
Yeah. So Saints -2, Lee -6, Batley -2. They're the favourites for their games respectively.
Those are the 3 that I said, weren't they? But you can
see
two.
Not a lot in it.
I think they said the women's game of the 3, didn't they? -6 to St Helens.
I mean,
but
I tell you what would be hilarious if all the games went to Golden Point. That really bugger everything up. So I'm always a fan of chaos.
Particularly the men's game, because there's not much time after that men's game if you allow
sweep up all the confetti,
lifting the cup and the medals between that and the 1895. I don't know where they warm
doing
up.
The press conference on the mix zone.
Halifax and Batley warming up behind the fireworks going off as St Helens or as Lee or Hull KR celebrate. I think what we're all looking forward to is a great day for a billing.
Yeah,
with lots of likeable people involved.
Weather is scheduled to be good.
Yeah,
which it normally is on Challenge Cup day. So the other thing we were talking about in the car going over to the press conference was that if you're talking of the men's teams, they're both coached by halfbacks. They will both go out to play attractive, winning rugby. They will not be trying to wrestle their opponents into submission, and I think there'll be a great spectacle.
You'd like to think so, yeah.
I think we'll see a lot of points as well across the afternoon.
Yeah.
Where the best teams win.
Yeah.
The best teams will win. A referee will not make a mistake to determine the outcome.
Have they announced who it is yet?
No, it's usually Tuesday afternoon, I think.
They haven't announced any.
Go on then. Never mind who's going to win. Who's going to be the referee?
I don't know. I think as well as
Rob Hicks is coming back again.
It'd be no surprise probably between Liam Moore or Chris Kendall. I don't know.
See, there's another opposing teams that we don't know who's going to win. Is it going to be Liam or Chris Kendall?
What do you do with your medals? You know, when you get a medal, I don't know why they give you them.
They're shoved in boxes somewhere.
Because it's not as if you've won or anything. I know it's an achievement to referee in a fight. I'm not saying it's not an achievement, but
it's a memento, isn't it?
You haven't framed it. It's not on the wall.
No,
not sold them like
I don't even know where they are.
With the match day programme open at your name, little medal hung over.
Definitely not. No. The only thing I've got framed is my Rugby League World Cup final shirt from 2008 with a medal. But I haven't. No, I haven't. I keep meaning. I kept thinking when I finish, I'll get all these medals out. They'll all need to be cleaned, and I have to put them in some sort of frame. But I'd have to find them first.
Being cash converters in Dewsbury. Been melted down for a scrap value of about 5 pence. Oh, that's not harsh on you. That's harsh on the RFL. I need a programme upsetting the RFL. The world isn't it all now, Phil. So we will be there on Saturday,
all day.
So stay tuned. All the
we will be frantically. Well, I'll be frantically writing a magazine on Sunday, which will reflect Wembley.
But we'll get video up throughout the afternoon on Saturday. Hopefully, we'll do something live at the ground. I'm not sure logistically how we can do that yet. Not in terms of doing it, because we can do it. It's just in terms of time. By the time we've got in and got set up at 11 o'clock, I don't know. I'm hoping we're the first people there. If you
want to be the first person there, I'll leave early enough to make you the first.
I don't want to leave that early because I'm working the night before. But
we'll go straight from work if you want.
Sustenance. We've got to get some sustenance on the way down as well.
I think we'll manage that.
Yeah, but it's going to be great.
Men of a certain age will definitely need to
work out where we're parking. But if you're going, enjoy it. We'll be back on Monday to look back on it.
Might be tired.
Yeah, I think we will be. We'll have another interview up later next week about the wheelchair tournament. We haven't mentioned the Wheelchair European Championship.
It's not out still.
Oh yeah, sorry. I forgot. I didn't break the embargo. No one told me, so I can't break an embargo if no one tells me. Right, we're off. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the week. Keep an eye on the channel. Loads of stuff coming up from today, and I'll try to get Edwin up happy up quick because he was really good. So good luck to everyone. Safe journey and safe journey back.